Ted Bundy, a name that pulled strangers in with a confident smile and cool gaze, then left communities shattered when his truth was revealed. To man, he looked like an ideal American, good-looking, well-educated, and disturbingly charming enough to disarm both strangers and the system. Would eventually bring him down. Behind the charm lay a calculated predator whose crime horrify the nation and change how investigators hunt serial killers. Let's start from where it all began. Theodore Robert Cowell was born on November 24, 1964 in Burlington, Vermont. He spent his early years living with his mother and grandparents, later adopting the name Bundy from his stepfather. His childhood was a complicated family tensions, questions about paternity, and a sense that he never quite fit in. From an early age, he showed signs of social awkwardness and occasional cruelty to animals, a detail that, in retrospect, would be cited by psychologists trying to understand how his pathology developed. In college, Bundy studied psychology and later law. He even worked in a crisis hotline. He cultivated the image of the thoughtful, introspective man, someone neighbors and classmates described as polite and articulate. But beneath that carefully managed surface, a darker side was developing. Bundy's first widely recognized series of attacks occurred around the University of Washington. In Seattle in 1974, young women vanished from public places and the edges of campuses. Witnesses later described a man pretending to be injured who asked for help, then produced a gun or handcuffs or otherwise overpowered the victim. The pattern alarmed law enforcement, but coordination across jurisdictions struggled because Bundy moved frequently and used different ruses in different places. The killing spree most commonly associated with Ted Bundy spanned roughly 1974 to 1978 across multiple U.S. states including Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, and Florida. His victims were mostly young, attractive women. He used a range of lures, pretending to be injured and asking for help, impersonating an authority figure, or offering a ride. Once he gained control, Bundy would often bludgeon or strangle his victims, then sometimes revisit or transport their bodies. He confessed to 30 homicides shortly before his execution, though investigators have long suspected his true number of victims may have been higher. Bundy's tactics combined pretense and opportunism. He could look harmless and frightened, which made young women more likely to approach him. He sometimes pretended to be a police officer and wore a fake badge. In other cases, he feigned injury and asked for help. Once the victim was disoriented or isolated, he attacked swiftly and without mercy. Those who survived, a handful of women who escaped, provided vital eyewitness accounts that helped law enforcement piece together descriptions of Bundy and his methods. The majority of Bundy's victims were young women, many college age, many Caucasian, and the same body type. His ability to appear charming, intelligent, and trustworthy allowed him to lure these women into situations they believed were safe. The interstate and multi-state nature of his crimes made him especially difficult to detect and track at the time. Bundy's first major arrest came in Utah in 1975 for kidnapping and attempted murder, but even that would not stop him. He escaped custody twice in 1977. The first escape occurred during a hearing in Aspen, Colorado. When representing himself, he was allowed to visit the law library and slipped out a second-floor window. He fled into the Colorado mountains and lived rough for several days before being recaptured. The second escape happened on December 30th, 1977. When Bundy used a makeshift weapon to escape from a county jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, and vanished for weeks before resurfacing in Florida, a decision that would end in some of his most notorious crimes. In Florida in 1978, Bundy's crimes escalated. On a single evening in January, he attacked sorority houses at Florida State University and Florida Technological University, now University of Central Florida. One of the most brutal attacks occurred at the Chi Omega sorority house in Gainesville, where he murdered 2 women and injured others, an assault that shocked students nationwide and made Bundy a household name. He was later linked to the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, an especially disturbing crime that revealed he would deviate from his prior victim profile and further fueled the urgency to stop him. Investigators faced a complicated puzzle. Patterns suggested a single predator moving across state lines. Yet until the late 1970s, coordination between state police forces was limited. Still, the mounting evidence finally converged. After his arrest in 1975 in Utah and subsequent escapes and recapture, Bundy was finally arrested and charged with several murders. The breakthrough in linking Bundy to specific slayings involved careful forensic work, witness statements, and, crucially, his own behavior and the trail he left across state lines. Trials became media spectacles. In 1979 and 1980, he faced trials in Florida for the murders of Sandy Levy, Margaret Bowman, and others, including the Chi Omega killings and the murder of Kimberly Leach. Bundy famously chose to represent himself at his trials, a decision that brought drama to the courtroom. During the legal proceedings, prosecutors assembled evidence from survivors, forensic matches, and items linking Bundy to crime scenes. In 1979, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in Florida. Later convictions affirmed his death sentence for additional murders. His appeals dragged on for years, and he used the publicity to grant interviews and manipulate the media, sometimes confessing more details about crimes as the end approached. One of the most chilling facets of Bundy's final years was his interviews and eventual confessions to more murders than he had been convicted for. In the months before his execution, he spoke at length with investigators and journalists, admitting to additional killings and providing detail about how he had abducted and murdered victims across multiple states. Those confessions expanded the known scope of his crimes and left investigators to piece together victim lists and unsolved disappearance that may be linked to him. On January 24, 1989, after more than a decade of appeals, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. His last words were reported as a short message to his family. His execution closed one of the darkest chapters in modern American crime. Beyond the facts and dates, Bundy's case left several lasting impacts. First, it underscored the importance of interstate cooperation among police departments when dealing with a mobile offender. The FBI and local agencies later expanded information sharing practices to better link seemingly isolated crimes. Second, Bundy's case fed forensic advances, notably in how physical evidence, bite mark analysis, controversial in later years, and careful victimology could be used to connect cases. Third, the case prompted reflection about how charisma and social competence can mask violent tendencies, a hard lesson for communities that had trusted him. The human cost of Bundy's crimes cannot be overstated. Dozens of families lost daughters, sisters, mothers. Survivors endured lifelong trauma. Journalists, authors, and filmmakers have since revisited the case repeatedly, sometimes with the aim of understanding the pathology of serial killers, other times to warn and educate. The Bundy saga serves as both a true crime cautionary tale and a case study in criminal behavior, law enforcement response, and the limits of public perception. Finally, the Bundy story raises uncomfortable questions about fascination and fame. Despite the brutality of his crimes, Bundy became a figure of macabre public interest. Books, documentaries, films, and podcasts proliferated. Critics argue this attention risks glamorizing the killer while overshadowing victim stories. Advocates urge that retellings must center the victims and the systemic lessons from the investigation. Ted Bundy's story is one that still chills the world decades later. It reminds us that evil doesn't always wear a mask or hide in the shadows. Sometimes it looks like the charming neighbor next door, the polite stranger at the library, or the smiling law student who shakes your hand. Bundy's crimes tore through families, exposed failures in law enforcement coordination, and forced society to look closely at what makes a monster. But beyond the headlines and documentaries, his legacy carries one clear lesson: appearances can deceive, and trust can be the most dangerous weapon of all. The women he killed were real people, each with dreams, laughter, and lives that deserved to continue. Their memories deserve more than just being names in a case file. They deserve to be remembered, honored, and protected by the lessons we take from their stories. So as you finish this story, take a moment to think about how little we sometimes know the people around us, and how fragile safety can be when evil hides behind a smile. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there are more real stories waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, stay tuned, stay aware, and stay curious.